Hi, everybody, and welcome to the final webcast in the spring edition of the Changemakers live webcast series brought to you by the College of Liberal Arts and the OSU Alumni Association. I'm CLA Professor Susan Shaw, and my pronouns are she and her. Before we begin, I want to encourage you to ask folks in the Zoom Q&A function that's down at the bottom of your screen, and then we'll do our best to answer them before the event's over. Please be sure to include your name, pronouns, and the question you're asking. As you may know, the Changemakers series features Oregon State alumni who are blazing a path toward justice, equity, and community safety and strength. And we've been so impressed with our previous guest speakers who've shared how they're benefiting their communities. Today, we're looking forward to hearing from our final guest of the year, Tonga Hopoi, who graduated from OSU in 2012. Tonga is the chief of staff for the majority leader in the Hawaii State Senate, and she was awarded the 2021 OSU Young Alumni Award. So Tonga, why don't you turn on your screen and we'll just jump right in. Hi, it's so good to have you with us. Welcome.
Hi, Susan. Thank you for having me, and aloha, everyone.
So Tonga's not your birth name. Tell us how you came to be known as Tonga.
That is one of my favorite questions, and I have it often here in Hawaii because it's very uncommon to have a girl with the name Tonga. Usually it's the boys in our families that have the name. So when I grew up in Portland, Oregon, I went to Oregon State, I think 2009, and we were playing rugby. I just joined a rugby team. I was looking for a community. The hardest thing is to say Milika Lakona as you're running on the pitch, right? People are running, you're running into each other. So we had a little group meeting, and then I told them, I've never really fit my name. And they're like, what do you mean? I was like, I always felt like a tomboy. I was like, maybe my name was Jordan or something. So we all started laughing. And then I told them one of the things I love is my boy cousins. Their name is Tonga. I love it. They're like, well, you can be Tonga too if you want. So we tried it out for one game. And I was really waiting for my mom's reception. So my mom is sitting there listening, and they're yelling out, Tonga, Tonga, here. There's my coaches are cheering for me. My teammates are calling me over for a huddle or to read out the play. And my mom said to me, how nice it is to hear her country's name spoken fondly, adoringly. She just stood there and she was surprised. She goes, who's Tonga? And then she sees me running. She sees me running across the pitch. And she's like, that's you? I was like, yeah, is it okay if I have that name? She said, yeah, I never thought you would want that as a name, but it's really nice to hear something from home when you're out and about. And so that's how we chose Tonga. And then Oregon State, it just kind of caught on fire when I started doing more of my leadership roles and student government.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great rugby name. I can just see it on your jersey or something. That'd be great. I admire you for playing rugby. I didn't know about rugby when I was young enough to do these things without worrying about hurting myself. But if I were younger and had another chance, I'd play rugby too. That looks like such a great sport. So you mentioned you're originally from Portland. So tell us about how your mother ensured that you grew up knowing about your heritage and your culture.
I think about, it's such a weird concept to think that I grew up very Tongan in Portland, but it is true to the word. I grew up very Tongan in Portland. Portland allowed for our culture to flourish. We had Tongan churches. Anytime we had events for youth programs or Easter Sunday, everything was in Tongan. We were always welcomed into different spaces. So my mom was part of the United Methodist Church growing up. And one of the things that she always wanted for us to do was to be a part of her program. And so what that meant was reading the gospel during her program. And she would just go back and forth and explaining to us, even though you don't know what you're reading, you have to learn Tongan. It's ingrained that you have to learn Tongan. So I would read the English Bible and the Tongan Bible in tandem to try to understand what the Tongan Bible was saying. And so over time, I realized it was a collection of stories teaching us right from wrong, morality, truth, and justice. And so I picked up a lot of my Tongan from reading those kind of translations. But that was something that my mom wanted to make sure all of us siblings and children had, was the understanding that we bring our full selves. Like, not only are you Tongan, you speak Tongan, you also understand the traditions and the culture. So that's what you bring as you carry yourself out there in the world.
Mhm. Well, so how do you think your upbringing influenced your commitment to social justice?
I was thinking about my time at Oregon State, trying to understand more of why I was so passionate to lift up others when it was not common. I think that's what I noticed coming from Portland, Oregon, being fully immersed in Tongan, proud of who I am, comfortable owning the ground that I walk on. And then coming to Oregon State and realizing that if we wanted to be a part of the greater campus, we had the Polynesian Cultural Club, but we would have to go and argue for funding and student fees, like try to get funding for our programs. And the first time someone told me that I was part of a small cultural group, I was like, what? They're like, yeah, you're part of a small cultural group. But remind you, I think the fullness of my culture, I never really thought of it as a small cultural group. So I read into that more, try to understand why we're categorized like that, understood student fees, understood the student leadership programs, and then realized that in wanting to make it more fair for everyone, we had to speak up. So I started asking around, like, why we weren't in certain groups, like Associate Students of Oregon State, why I didn't see many persons of color in leadership positions, like Student Fees Committee. I just started asking because I was very curious in this world that I am now a part of, Oregon State University. And when I started asking those questions, I also got a lot of support that was like, well, this is what it's been like, but you can change it. And then that's when I was like, no, like always kind of, it's not me, I'm just asking because I'm just curious. I'm always very curious to learn about the systems around me. And so the more questions I asked, the more I looked like a leader because I was questioning certain systems, certain practices. And then I became very comfortable in my voice to continue the stories that I've heard that have never made it to the forefront. And then when I realized what social justice was about, I realized that's where my voice also gave wind to, because I felt very comfortable in that space, because it's about asking questions, it's about challenging the status quo. If we're not all at the table, why not? I just would ask those kind of questions. And then over time, I got the opportunity to create my own table. And that's when I ran and I became student body president, and we had the most diverse cabinet that they've ever seen. But that's what was, what is usual and fair to me, is to see everyone at the table.
Well, you were an intern in the Obama White House, and so another first for you. I'm going there as a Tongan woman in the White House. So tell us about that, and what did you do there? What did you learn? What was valuable for you in that experience?
When I remember going through the interview, and I think I was interning for Senator Jeff Merkley at the time. So I got the phone call for the White House. I also told the chief of staff for Jeff Merkley that, anytime I'm going to get a phone call, I have to go to take the interview. The interview is usually like 15 to 20 minutes, but my interview ran for about an hour and a half. And I was sitting there on the phone like, I don't know if this is a good thing. I've never interviewed for a position in the White House. This could also be really bad. And they're like, this kid is not a good fit. But I realized the questions that the interviewer was honing in on was my faith in my family. Mm-hmm. Like those questions of what does this role mean for your family? What does this role mean for your community? And those aren't very typical questions that you would get in these. So I sat there and I realized, be your full authentic self. So I told them, we don't really travel away from our community, our collective community. Like me going to college, the first question, all of them were like, where's college? You know, it's very uncommon to step away from the group that you're comfortable with. But when I shared, it was for my family that I wanted to step away. And I keep the faith that it's going to work out. That's what faith is that it's going to work out. You just keep trudging along. And sharing that more and more, when I was offered the position and I met the interviewer, that's when she told me, she's like, you stood out amongst all the other candidates because the first thing you said was, you're doing this for your family. It wasn't thinking about a next position. You know, other people think about the ladder or climbing. You were just like, this is something I want to do for my community and for my family. And so if I'm given an opportunity, I'll work my hardest. I'm a quick learner. And I also appreciate working with other people, being very accepting and listening. And so got the interview. One of the most memorable things that happened was when we went to go meet the first lady. And I called my mom. I was like, Mom, we're meeting the first lady tomorrow. She's like, but you work outside her desk. And then I'm like, no, but this is like the formal meeting where we get to introduce ourselves. You know, she comes in, we do the good morning, Mrs. Obama, and you go back to work. But this is where she gets to meet us one-on-one. So my mom tells me, well, you know, she's one of the highest officials in the country. You need to dress appropriately. And I said, what do you mean dress appropriately? Because I packed all my bags in the 2 weeks I got the offer. I had 2 weeks to get out there. And she said, if you open your bag, I packed a Tongan dress for you, a puletaha. And I said, I opened the bag, you know, because I haven't opened it in like a month. And I opened it, I was like, there's nothing in here. She's like, unzip the flap. So I unzipped the flap and it was a puletaha like this, but maroon with, it was tan with maroon trimming. And my mom's like, you wear that so she knows that you're Tongan. And then I was like, okay, because my name, my name is Tonga, but we'll do that. So I wore my puletaha with a kie, my traditional Tongan attire for meeting a public official, a very high public official. As I'm walking through the White House, we're going through the East Wing, through the residence, and then I'm coming out the West Wing. And I ran into Secretary Jack Liu, who's the Treasury Secretary at the time. And he looks at me and he like, we're all walking in a line, all 12 interns, and I'm all the way at the end. And he like looks around, he's like, where are you from? And then I look over and I'm like, you know, proudly, Portland, Oregon. And then he like pauses and he like looks me up and down. He goes, no, where are you from? And I was like, oh, the Kingdom of Tonga. My family's from the South Pacific. And then he stopped and looked over. He's like, well, it's nice to see you here at the White House. It's very nice to meet you. And your name is? And I go, Tonga. He goes, oh, who would have guessed? and we both started laughing. And he's right outside the Oval Office going in. And so they're calling us to keep going. He's like, it's an honor to see you in your traditional wear. Thank you. And then I just, you know, it's for me, I'm like, okay, you're welcome. Walking. And I received the same reception from the First Lady. When everyone came around, they're all standing in a line. And at the time we had the Africa Summit, the first time all the leaders from Africa were coming. And I remembered, but I totally forgot that she was also trying different tribal prints throughout the events that week. So when I showed up in my attire and she showed up in her traditional African attire, just trying out outfits, we kind of matched and we started laughing. And she looks over at me and she's like, okay. I was like, hi, Mrs. Obama. My name is Tonga Hopoi. I'm here from Oregon State University. She's like, okay. She's like, I really love your dress. I was like, oh, thank you. I was like, and then, you know, very casual blurting out, well, my mom dressed me. And then she responded, oh, my mom dressed me too. And then we both started laughing because Marilyn is very like the mother of the residents. And that's Mrs. Obama's mom. So we both stood there kind of laughing and then we took our photo. And then I walked away thinking like, you fit. Every part of you fits. Every inch, everything, every part of you fits in this White House. And then she had her speaker series and she talked about that point to bringing your full selves to the table. And that she looked around and she's like, if you have any differences, if you have any cultural, any traditional, anything that makes you unique, bring that, share that with people. And so the next speaker series, when we were with now President Biden, more and more folks were wearing their traditional wear, not just me. But they were telling me when they saw me walk down that aisle in my traditional Tongan attire, they were cheering. They were like, you know, everyone was doing business casual, and I did business casual, but in my traditional sense.
Oh, that's great. What a great story. I love that. Well, you're still working in politics, so tell us about your work in the office of the Speaker, or the Majority Leader for the Hawaii State Senate.
Thank you. This was our first year, and I serve with Senator Drew Mamo Kanuha. He represents Kona and Ka'u. And so what we do here as Majority Leader is we move every priority for the Senate. This was the first year that we were able to actually move twice as many bills as before. And I think it's because we have a young group. My senator is the youngest in the Senate, and then I'm the chief of staff and one of the youngest in the Senate. But we are fearless in what we want to do. And we're fearless to also listen. Like when people have different priorities, we will talk to all the chairs, find out where they have common grounds, find out if there's something that the chair will be willing to do differently this year. Like, what is something different you want to do? Because every year of repeating the same thing, you're not going to be successful unless you change. And so that's kind of what our pitch was. And we were able to move 700 bills in the first crossover. And then we passed the first time in 20 years, for every House bill that was passed, there was 2 Senate bills. So we picked up the efficiency. We made everyone kind of realize you're all in the same boat. No one is going to be successful rowing on their own. We all need to be together. And our personal priorities that we work for in our district is helping a lot of the Hawaiian immersion schools, because there's a lot more families and a lot more Hawaiian homelands that are coming up that need schools that want to teach full Hawaii Olelo. Like the students will be learning in Hawaiian, speaking Hawaiian, everything that they do is ingrained in those values. So that was something that we noticed is an uptick in recent years, and we have more requests for immersion schools. So we're working on a school right now, helping them relocate to 5 acres, also creating housing for the teachers to make a more larger incentive for those kind of programs. So right now, other than helping the Senate be more efficient in what they do, it's really focusing on the schools and a lot of the keiki and what they want to do in our district.
Okay, terrific. Well, now also there was a powerful volcanic eruption and a tsunami in Tonga earlier this year that I'm sure a lot of our listeners heard about or saw in the papers. And you got involved in some grassroots efforts to help out. So tell us a little bit about what you did there.
So I'm smiling because, like I said, I ask a lot of questions, and maybe I shouldn't have this time, but I'm asking, like, what's the Tongan community doing right now to showcase what's happening in the islands? I asked around, and it finally made it to my senator, who told me, well, let's call, because Hawaii has so many military forces here. We have, I think, all the branches. We actually got onto a call with the Indo-Pacific commander, because my senator was like, well, I have a weekly call with them. Maybe this week you can ask them what they're doing in terms of the volcano eruption in Tonga. So we got to learn about the ships that we're sending, a lot of the reverse osmosis that they're using on the carriers to help clean the water. But I always felt that although it's unique to have a Tongan in the White House and have a Tongan in a position of leadership in the Senate, the aloha that I felt is not unique. It's pretty open for everyone. Like my friends, I know my friends who helped me along the way really resonated when the volcano went, and then all communication was cut off for about 2 months. All my friends are texting me how to help. So finally, I remembered at Oregon State about throwing events. And I was like, okay, the way you throw an event is you got to find a venue, you got to find someone with funding. And so I told my senator, do you think we can have a public drive? And he's like, well, a public drive. I was like, to receive donations for people, the aloha that I know that you all show for me, I want the Tongan people to know that that's who we are here in Hawaii. And so he's like, all right, so where do you want to have it? And I was like, Blaisdell. And Blaisdell is one of the largest theaters on Honolulu. It's at the heart of Honolulu. And so he's like, okay, so who's gonna fund it? I was like, well, I'll find someone. Called around Salvation Army, called around the East West Center, called around to the Red Cross. Even the Red Cross finally got a hold of Aloha United Way. Aloha United Way was like, you know what? We've actually been looking for a program to support the Tongan community here on Oahu. So maybe this is it for us. So what I did was pull together a venue, pull together someone who can possibly do the funding, and then started advertising in the newspapers at the Capitol. And we had one of the largest drives, February 21st at the Blaisdell. And the coolest thing about it is everyone who heard about it was donating. We had tutus come up who had like hand sewn mask, like 500 masks. Wow. You know, she's sewn it, she's dropping it off. We had families come with a lot of their coolers because they don't need them anymore and they're going to get new coolers. So they donated 40 coolers. And that goes a long way for the little islands who are just like living day by day and not having any refrigerator. The coolers really do help with keeping their food fresh. So throughout the day, we were watching more and more. And then we had something of a surprise happen. I don't know if anyone knows Josh Tatofi, but he's a very well-known artist here in Hawaii. He shows up with his band and starts playing music in the middle of the drive. Oh, so we kind of start traffic because people are pulling over to listen to Josh. And then people are coming by like dropping off dollars. Like someone came and was like, you know, I heard about this in the news. I don't have time to go shopping, but here's $50. Here's $100. So we're taking in donations, but we're also sharing a lot of our aloha with our families in Tonga. And so my video, because I took a couple videos and pictures, I shared it with them and they were in shock because a lot of their drives that they were doing was within their own community, within their own churches. But this one was a big, massive public drive. And you got to see many different cultures, Japanese, Chinese, everybody was coming out there just like, and giving us a lot of their used clothes. So my favorite part was we got a lot of kimonos. We had someone drop off like a bunch of kimonos. I was like, we're taking it. That's pretty cool. You know, like all these different items. And I have a 40-foot container that I'm working on. Right now, I think I'm up to 80% full. Wow. So next week I have a Costco, I have to go to Costco to do the final round of purchases. But then my shipping date is July 1st. Mm-hmm. And we're shipping a container. Matson also awarded us 100% covering the cost of the container and the shipping. That's great. Yeah, because as soon as they found out it was a public drive for everyone, it's hard not to say that you want to help.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. Well, you've kind of hinted at some of this, but what are the issues of social justice that are the most important? What are the ones that are nearest and dearest to your heart?
I think over time, I tend to forget how much representation matters. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But it's so crucial for people to realize that if you have that fire, if you have that passion, you have to feed it. You're drawn to certain things and to certain events and to certain people for a reason. Mm-hmm. And so I realize that now, being here in Hawaii and trying to still find different avenues of how to still feed that fire within me. And I participate in a girls mentorship program, Hawaii Girls State. So that part of social justice, the mentoring, the making sure as you climb, you lift as you climb, making sure that everyone is heard, keeping that hope alive. And I think just going to right now, from the many things that I want to do, I think sharing my story is the most critical piece that I could give. Because last year I did a similar talk like this. It was a keynote at the Pacific Islander Student Alliance. Mm-hmm. And I know all the faces of people there, right? They're all friends. But I realized after I shared my story, no one really knows your story until you start sharing. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the piece for social justice that I try to keep true to myself. representation matters, sharing your story, and being able to lift others as you climb. It's hard right now just looking at the times that our country is in, especially with gun violence. Black Lives Matter was a really big part of my life here because I thought about Oregon State and what it felt like when I was impeached the second week of school, and trying to understand a lot of the institutional systems that I was facing unseen to myself. I had no idea. I had no idea what it meant to be the first woman of color to win that position in 12 years until that happened. Then I started feeling it and I started realizing it. But representation matters. And I fought through that, came out a lot stronger, came out happier, because it shows you that you can rise through anything. You can rise through anything. It's all with how many times you fall. It's about how many times you get back up. And I realize that looking right now with what's going on in our country, it's just a very tough time to find some inspiration and some hope.
Yeah, that's such an important point about representation, because sometimes, it's who you are that speaks volumes, that people see you and think, wow, if she can do this, maybe there's an opportunity for me, or, gosh, there's somebody who looks like me who's doing this. And so that's an amazing part of this sort of social justice work, is just being who you are in the places that you are. And because of that, I mean, you've been the first one a number of times, the first Tongan to serve as a White House intern, the first Pacific Islander elected president of ASOSU. That's hard work. So what have been some of the challenges for you of being a barrier breaker?
I've never been called a barrier breaker, but thanks, Susan.
You are most welcome.
My challenges is finding strength in silence. I tend to keep busy and make myself busy because that makes me feel busy and important and doing the work. But it's also, there are gonna be silent moments when you really have to figure out what is happening around you. How does your little piece fit into this giant puzzle? And how someone looking from the outside is going to see you. So I have those weird, I call them weird because I will be in, everything around me can be falling apart, but I will center myself and then, be silent, but try to figure out all the points. Try to figure out the point of, why are you doing this? And then stepping back. Why are you doing this for those reasons? And then stepping back, looking on the outside. So at times, they are barriers, but I think of them as problems to work through instead of things to break through. I don't, breaking things, I don't really like violence. It's not anything that I like to focus my energy on. I like to understand and figure out the pieces, because in every issue, there's a human aspect that you can connect to. And it took me a long time, and I still every day practice it. A lot of problem solving, people think it's like moving pieces around, or maybe it's money, or maybe it's usually, if you're dealing with another human, it's the human aspect of it. And until you realize to sit down and listen, you're not really gonna make any changes. That is how I work through the barriers. I just keep trying to hone on my listening, and if I'm really intentful and doing good with whatever is going on. But being alone in this journey was something I also had to get very used to. Yeah, even sometimes, I think about, where are you going? I step out of my role and I look back and I'm like, hey kid, where are you going? And I think about where I want to be, and it's around like-minded individuals who are doing good work and helping people improve the quality of life. I love to be in neighborhoods and communities where we know we can change things for the better. That's the one thing I notice about me, is that that's where I'm always going to be. I'll always find my footing in that space.
So you touched on this a little bit, because you mentioned sort of the moment we're in and all the things that are going on right now. We have the school shootings, I think we're still reeling from Black Lives Matter and Me Too, and, a lot of horrible stuff's happening, but you seem so hopeful. What inspires you? What keeps you hopeful?
What keeps me hopeful is I wake up every single day. God wakes me up. I'm like, all right, we got another chance. I look around and I remember doing this interview when I was selected to be in the White House. I did this one interview and it was a very casual interview, but they asked me, what inspires you? And I told them, what inspires me is seeing the kids walking around in their traditional attire. When I see community events showing whatever it is that they love and that they find so much joy in, celebrating Chinese New Year's. I live here right next to Chinatown. I'll see them celebrating. That inspires me, is that we don't stop sharing who we are. We don't stop sharing our aloha. Every day there's gonna be those kind of events that just like kind of knock us straight. You take a step back, you realize there's that kind of darkness in the world. And there's certain things that are happening in certain parts of our country with mental health, but it's about what we choose to do today. And I find so much joy and hope when I can just see people still celebrating who they are. Like right now is Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, all the events that are happening, those people still inspire me, because we're going to keep going, we're going to keep sharing, and hopefully with more light, with more hope, we can drive out this darkness that we have in certain parts of our country. That also I think need that light. And that's something that if we keep sharing and keep bringing our full selves to the table, celebrating our children in every complexity that our children are in. I love my nieces and nephews. And I'm like, the funniest thing is I'm always telling my sister, don't yell, just use kind words. My sister's like, no one used kind words on us. Where is this kind words coming from? I said, because maybe he will get 110% more love than we did, always think of filling them with more than what we had. And so my sister looks at me. And so whenever I'm home visiting, there's a lot of warm, kind, stern words for the kids, but everyone has a good time. I think that's for me, just not giving up, because there's so much beauty. There's so much beauty in our world if we just take the time to listen and look. But yeah, when I tuned in to learn about the shootings, when I saw the president attend and just learned about the stories of the young kids that I think just turned 18 and was able to get a hold of those weapons, I think about their families. I think about their communities, think about whether or not they had someone who was cheering them on, telling them about light in the world, and those kind of things. And that's where I hope that if we carry it on, we can drive some of that darkness out.
So how do you think that your education at OSU helped you with all of this?
Oh my gosh, OSU, I was what did you call it? A holistic student. I learned as much in the classroom as I did outside the classroom. I went to church with my professors. It was for me, it was like realizing the importance of education that opens up the doors to my questions. I just had a lot of questions, and being in that space of education, everyone was very hospitable and warm to sit and answer, give me experiences. One of my favorite was Professor Ugalis and Professor Lonnie Roberts from my philosophy department. Oh my gosh, Professor Ugalis was a straight up professor, philosophy professor, talking about many beautiful things that happen in the past and in the future, but loved to challenge you as a student, would question you. And that to me, it would make me so upset, right? When a professor would question me and I'm like, wait, I'm the student, like trying to learn my role. And then I realized that critical aspect of him questioning me made me want to prove him wrong in his theory. So I'm sitting there thinking, and he's looking over at me and he's just kind of chuckling. He's like, I got you, didn't I? And I'm like, I'll get you tomorrow. It's okay. I'm going to come back stronger. Professor Lonnie Roberts, her class, Ethics of Diversity, really taught me about the other, understanding the other. Martin Bluebear's philosophy, the parts are greater than the sum. It was something that she was teaching, and she always honed in on us that you don't know anything. And then you're sitting there like, I think I know something, I'm in college. And then she looks over, she's like, if you think what we're teaching you in these books is everything, you just scratched the surface. It's what these books are giving you to discover, to dig deep, unravel things. Don't just take things for how they look. Ask questions, critically think about what's being presented in front of you, and if that's for you. And if not, what are you going to do? Are you going to improve it? How are you going to do that? You know, like all these other questions. And it really helped me ground the fact that I fit in this world. Oregon State really helped me see that. It's a very, I think, interesting dichotomy to think about, being in student body president, being impeached. And the first thing I say is, I fit. That showed me that I fit, because that year when I came back, we came back with so much fire that year. We came back, we lobbied at the state legislature. We were the only school who got their student fee funding building approved in a capital construction bill. Because even though I was impeached, we were sending caravans of students to the state legislature to testify. And then finally, when I got back into office, I got a phone call from then director. He was the government relations director. Oh,
Jock
he's totally going
Mills?
to kick me. Yes, Jock Mills. Jock Mills sent me an email about 7:30 at night. Hey, we have a meeting tomorrow with the speaker. And that was the speaker at the time at the Oregon State Legislature. I'm going to go up there myself. Mark was our, I think, chief finance officer at the time. And then President Ed Ray. I'm like, okay, that's great. I'm just like still healing from my wounds of being yelled at by everyone and publicly being yelled at. And then he's like, well, you're back in office, aren't you? Like, Jock really told me, like, pick yourself up and let's go. So that night I went and I spoke to the House of Representatives, which was a lot of the students at the time were meeting. And I told them about the meeting, because I didn't want this to just be Tonga's going to do this on her own, like usual, because I learned my lesson. I need to be with everyone. So I told them we need to create a resolution or something that gives our undying devotion to this building. And then the students are looking over and they're like, I think we can do a resolution to commit to showing up every year to the state legislature until they pass the SEC. So I'm like, okay, whatever you guys want to create. They created it that night. They passed it that night. The next morning it was drafted and emailed to me. I printed it off, Intercultural Student Services printed off, jumped into the caravan with Jock and Ed and Mark. And I'm just like, sitting in the van when I should be in class. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And they're like, how many, what time is your class? I was like, 1. Like, okay, we'll leave there at 12:15. So you'll make class on time. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm late because the president drives slow. Like, so we arrive in this room. Okay, Susan, I'm telling you, this is the first time I really felt that right time, right place. Because we're sitting there at the table. Mark gives the numbers for, if we delay the construction even further, we're going to come back next year with 20 million more to ask for. We have a lot of permits that are going to be delayed. We have to redo the permits. And then the speaker is just sitting there. And then Jock is at the end of the table. And Jock's just like quarterbacking, like saying nothing, but like giving us like the cues. And then after it's done, President Ed Ray goes, that we've been working on this. It doesn't go without question that we've worked on this. We did the referendum. Now we're here and it's being held up because someone has questions about someone else's building. That's just not fair. But we appreciate your time and we're going to keep trying. We're going to come and speak to the committee. So then Ed looks over and I guess I forgot to tell them that I came with this resolution, but it gets quiet and they're like, well, if there isn't anything else, and I'm like, you have to say something for the students have to say something. So I like raise my hand and the speaker goes, oh, and Ed goes, oh, yes, this is Tonga. This is our student body president. We wanted to bring her here because this is something that the students have made a priority, the SEC. And so as they're quiet, I like scoot across this resolution that no one has seen, only me and the students. but it's undying. It was, the resolution for undying devotion to the Students Experience Center. And as you read it, it tells the speaker, you may not pass it this session, but we will come every single year, especially on election year. And we are well aware of what's going on. And it was like one of my favorite things to see, because Ed looks over, Ed looks at me, and I'm like, and I like to thank you for this time. So pass it across. We walk out of that meeting and Jock goes, resolution, huh? And I'm like, you told me to work with everyone. So we got a resolution. And then we get down on the staircase. Mark looks up at me and Mark's like, I think she just got us that building. And Jock looks over and he's like, I think Tonga just got the building. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like, what bill, what are we talking about? But they told me that it was an election year for him. And I unknowingly said what I said, because that's how we feel. Well, we're going to show up every single day. And so I remember riding home in the van and they were like, well, do you want a Starbucks or anything? You deserved it. Yeah, thanks. So we pulled over, we got some ice cream, then we got to campus and he dropped me off to class and I went to class, And then I remember hearing on the floor when the Students Experience Center was pulled out of the capital construction bill, moved into a separate appropriations bill and was passed, they were talking about Oregon State. We were the only building that got pulled out, like the whole bill went down. Everybody lost in that year, but Oregon State line item was taken out and put it into a different appropriations bill. I was like cheering. It was in March. I remember we were just like so excited. We did it. We finally did it.
That's such a great example of, how people can make a difference and how people can work together to do good. And I wanted to read you a comment that one of our listeners made, because I think it's just wonderful. And she says, thank you, Ms. Hopoi, for being yourself. You are an inspiration to listen to. I hope you will find a way to be a mentor to as many young people, especially young girls, as possible. We need more people with your caring attitude and drive in all our public offices. Indeed, keep asking questions.
Oh, that's very sweet. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, that does lead me to a question about, do you plan to run for public office at some point, or do you see yourself staying more on the support side of elected officials?
I think it's like the question right now with a lot of folks who's been kind of watching me and seeing the trajectory. I really do see myself as someone who would be one day in public office. I want it to be for the right reasons. And so I've joined my neighborhood board here in Chinatown. I'm very excited, listening and being on the ground with everyone. But I know that one day when that campaign comes, it's going to be really exciting. I remember running at Oregon State and how excited I was. And I felt the same with the donation drive that we had at Blaisdell. It was very similar, pulling it grassroots, pulling everyone together. And then when everyone showed up, we had over 100 people there collecting, bringing in donations, but they were all saying, who pulled this together? Like what organization? And they were like, well, Tonga. And it was just me like walking around, making sure everything was coordinated. And that's the piece that I want to keep going all the way in the office. And so I know one day it's going to happen. I just want it to be when the time is right, when I have the community support, when I know their ears, because I want to be able to represent their voices. When I know what's going on the ground, that's when I'll feel it's right.
Yeah. Well, one of the first guests we had on Changemakers when we first started was Sarah Gelser. And Sarah was actually one of my students. I'm always so proud to say that. And she's now a state senator. She started off as the representative for this area, and now she's the state senator for Lynn and Benton counties. And so I think it's a great path to take. And I know she's making such a difference. And I would imagine, you would be blazing some trails there too, I think, and really could make a difference with that. So if you get to that point, I'll put you in touch with her if you want some advice about running. But
that'd be great.
So your work has been recognized by OSU, and recently you were awarded an alumni office, young alumni. What did that mean to you to have OSU recognize the work you've done?
It was I was very surprised. I was in the office. We had just got done with a few briefings for the senator, and I got the email, and I'm sitting there reading it that you were selected. Wait, I first read it where I was nominated, and I was like, oh, really cool, that's nice. And then when I was selected, like I sat down, there was like tears of joy because I'm like, this is so crazy. It's going to be 10 years since I ran for student body president at Oregon State. And it just felt full circle, but also I don't think of it much about the places that I've gone because I think Oregon State to me was one of my favorite places that I've ever been because it not only was I surrounded by people who cared about answering my questions and helping me with my growth, it was also that fire. I told them when I came blazing from Portland, Oregon, and came to Oregon State, that fire was honed there. It was forged. It became something more that led into the White House that I still feel invincible. And it's that piece that I think about when I was sitting there receiving the award and thinking about all the people that could be here just to receive that award. I thought about my cabinet. I thought about all the teachers, all of support staff, all the admin, and I just really felt a kind of a full circle and kind of a healing process that came from not that I didn't want the award. It was just a very like organic process that happened that took me by surprise. And I don't get surprised very often because I'm kind of just enjoying and trailblazing my life. But that took me, I sat down, Susan, and I just was like very emotional because how much I love this school.
Mm-hmm. Mm. That makes a professor's heart happy. I'm sure it's making the alumni folk. I'm happy to hear that too. But that's wonderful. Let me see if folks have any questions, because I've been prattling on with you for a while here, and let me give other folk a chance. So look down at the bottom, there's that Q&A function you can use to ask a question or make a comment, and I'll kind of watch for that. So if you want to put something in, so we'll give folks a minute. I'll ask one more question now so folks have a second to put anything in there. So what advice would you have for students who want to do social justice work and who want to make a difference in their communities?
My favorite story is working at Intercultural Student Services. When I first got there, I was a part-time office assistant. And I realized that space was used by a lot of student groups to come and hold their weekly meetings. One of the things I loved was being in those spaces, listening, seeing how they would plan their events. Being engaged in other communities really help you see where you can go with your goals, with your leadership. I learned Robert's rules by sitting inside the Cambodian Student Association because they were very firm on that. I would just sit there and listen, like, oh, okay. And so I would take those back to the Polynesian Cultural Club. Like, hey, everyone, we're now going to be using Robert's rules. This is what it is. We're going to have to work on our budget, but being together in those spaces of how to build your own communities is the best ever. I think that's where, when I decided to run for office, it was inside Intercultural Student Services. And we had all the different student groups there. And we were just, trying and testing the waters. But it was awesome when they showed up. When people show up for you, you have no idea what that means when you're out there fighting and you see the line building, more and more people. My favorite was the Muslim Student Association. I have to tell this story because it's one of my favorites. I was told, okay, you got to go talk to all the student groups. Here's when the Muslim Student Association is going to meet. And then this is the timing that they're going to let you speak. And then for me, being growing up Tongan, I know what it's like to grow up in a matriarch, and then I know what it's like to participate in a patriarch because of our church, the church structure. So I'm sitting there looking around. There is no woman in this meeting. And I'm like, oh my gosh, because my friends, right? My friends are just like, you got this. And I'm like, but there's no woman in this meeting. What am I doing? So then my friend Ali tells me, he's like, no, You speak your heart, they will understand, but they're not going to make eye contact. Just be mindful that that's a cultural aspect, is that they're not going to make eye contact with you. So as I'm speaking, they're not making eye contact, and I'm like, oh, maybe I'm like missing it. And so this was when we did the peace rally after they burned the mosque. I think it was 2011, we did the peace rally. So then 2 days later, when we had the peace rally, the Muslim Student Association was the largest, and they brought their families, and it was full, all in the student union. And like the elders were coming up and telling me like, very good, and thank you for showing up for us. Those things, you never know what it's like until you work together and you listen to each other, and you become their voices when they don't feel like they have one.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I see we've got an audience question here, so let me check it out and see. So what did you learn in DC that has helped you in the Hawaiian capital?
What did I learn? DC is it's such a different pace. What I appreciated about DC was my work ethic that came about. When I went to Tonga, because after I served in the White House, the State Department worked with the First Lady's office, and we did some public engagements in Tonga. So I spoke at 10 schools, 10 colleges, and they were very excited when they found out I can speak Tongan. So that even more so moved the message across. What was helpful from DC going to Tonga and now coming to Hawaii was realizing the different avenues that my work ethic kind of lifted me to a position where I was very comfortable. Like when I told them that some days I'd wake up at 4 a.m. because I have to wake up at 4 a.m. and go do like advance on the ground prior to events in the White House. There was never a time where you didn't feel a burden. It was always an honor. And I think public service is always like that. It's an honor to serve. And so when I came here to Hawaii, a few of the things that I saw is my work ethic kind of just like shot it to the roof, that people were like, it's okay, just take it easy, we're all gonna get there. And that's the thing that I had to find very funny was learning how to cater my work ethic to not only be able to do the work on my own, but to how to share it with others and lifting up others to help work together. So DC, it really tells you that your team is how you succeed. You succeed with a team. So coming here and then for them to see my work ethic and then listening to them, because I listen when they're like, hey, we're going to take it easy. We're going to get there. But, you're moving kind of fast. And that's my favorite part, because then after that, it became very casual that if you needed something to get done quickly, it was me. I made that side on our team. I was always like that. I was like, come on, Tom, or be like, come on, Lisa, we got to get going. And that for me just made it exciting, because that's what I brought to the team. And I noticed that too when I was in speaking engagements in the islands. They were asking me, how was it being, alone in DC? Because they think about the one Tongan. They think about the one Tongan in the White House. And I told them I never felt alone. I always felt like we were a team. And that team aspect coming from DC, that you can achieve more, is very similar to here in the Senate, because we just did it, a historical year for the Senate. And it's kind of like shocking to some people until you look at our office. And it's that young office that's very fearless, but also working together to make sure everyone feels a part of the team and strong together.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Tonga. We're about out of time, and so I better make my little announcements and then let everybody go have dinner, and you can enjoy your warm afternoon in Hawaii while we're still cool here in Oregon. But thank you so much for taking time out to talk to us. And it's been a fabulous conversation, and it's been incredibly inspiring. And so I appreciate that. And so thanks to everyone for coming. This is our last Changemakers of the year. This program has been brought to you by the College of Liberal Arts and the Alumni Association. But we also hope that you'll check out other events that might be of interest to you. For example, like tomorrow's Yellowstone Travel Talk conversation with former National Geographic Editor-in-Chief and OSU alum Chris Johns and Oregon State Ecology Professor and OSU alum Bill Ripple. You can find that event and even more at fororegonstate.org/events. So thanks to everybody for participating. Thanks to Grady, Mary, and Liz for the help keeping us going. And Tonga, thanks to you for all the work you're doing. We're really proud of you. So everybody have a good evening. Thanks and good night.